Today on the Empower LEP podcast, I talk to Dr. Liz Angoff, and we have an awesome conversation about her journey as an LEP, where she was before, what she's doing now, how she got there. It was really inspiring for me to talk to her, and I am so excited to bring it all to you. So Dr. Liz Angoff, her resources can be found at explainingbrains.com. So if you haven't already checked out that website, I highly suggest you do. She has practitioner tools, she has parent tools, she has usable links that you can use for your reports, for parents. If you've ever been to a training with her, she has so many resources. It's just unbelievable. So explainingbrains.com. And then her website is drlizangoff.com. So if you have families looking for her, if you want to just check out her practice website, it's drlizangoff.com. So please take a listen. I'm really excited to bring that to you today. And this is kind of the final countdown for LEP Launchpad Foundations. So if you have not signed up for LEP Launchpad yet, now's the time. We are starting on May 28th. We will begin sessions at 4 o'clock. They will be 90 minutes long. You are going to be led through various aspects of business so that you feel more equipped to start your business. And if you end the sessions feeling like there's no way I want to start a business, then it is worth the money. So I'm bringing expert-led trainings to you. We are going to be a cohort. We're almost at 30 participants, so we've got a nice group already, and we still have some time to go. So if you want more information, please check out empowerlep.com/launchpad. And or find me on Instagram or just at empowerlep.com, you will find it. So I would love to have you. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. And please enjoy this episode with Dr. Liz Angoff. All right, well, welcome back to the Empower LEP podcast. I am here with Dr. Liz Angoff. Dr. Liz, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. This is fantastic.
Well, I'm so excited to interview you today because, like we were talking about before, this is kind of an exclusive interview because while you talk about all of the amazing things that you're doing all the time on all these different topics, I think I've chosen one that you haven't really talked about in the public before, or at least to our community. So yeah, I'm excited to talk to you about you and your life and your transition from, your previous roles and things that you've been doing in your career into where you are now, how you got there, and all of the things that you've gone through in it. So I'm excited.
Fantastic. I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited to dive into this because I haven't been able to talk about it before. So this is great.
Perfect. Well, I'm just going to kind of, everybody kind of knows a little briefing from the intro, and hopefully they have benefited from your trainings and the resources that you have. But I first just want to say thank you for all of that because you are just really helping to educate the field, not just our field as professionals, but also our families. And you just are really doing an amazing job at helping to further the field, I think, in the really special way that you do. So just wanted to say thank you.
So meaningful. Thank you so much for saying that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And for those of you who haven't somehow taken a training with Dr. Liz, the resources that you give at the end of all of those, it's like I am not great at having actual tangibles. I'm not great at it. It's not my strength, but this is like you are just so fantastic at it, and everything that you provide is so useful. So just want to give a little plug for if anyone hasn't for some reason seen or gone to one of your trainings, that even what happens after is amazing.
Well, fantastic. Well, I will say that trainings are so fun for me, and I'm actually going to be expanding my training offering. I just got approved by the American Psychological Association to provide CEs. So definitely check out the website and what's there now, but it will be populated very soon at explainingbrains.com/webinars with more offerings, and you can actually get CEs and continue your education with me. So that's a super, super exciting new development.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. And that is really amazing. And, one of the things that is so cool about you, and this will kind of segue into your path, is that you have a PhD and you are an educational psychologist. I feel like this may be more popular in other states, but I feel like in California, we have very few doctorate level educational psychologists. And so I feel like you're representing us, all of us wannabes, who like have imposter syndrome of like the master's level educational psychologist. But I love that, like all of the people who, all of these like clinical psychologists and pediatric neuropsychologists and everybody like, it's like you are you are the PhD level, so people, and then you get that educational psychologist name out there and you really embrace it, so thank you for that. I wish like I wish in my own just knowledge that I wish there had been more of like a, maybe you would want that, maybe that's the direction you should go, is like a PhD, right? But for me, I was like, I can get a master's and practice what I want to practice. Like that's amazing, right? So there were the reasons for doing that. But segue into, I would really love to hear about your path, because I know that it didn't start in school psychology. So I want to hear kind of how you got to school psychology and how you really made those decisions across your education, training, and career.
Yeah, so I started by just wanting to live in California, and the only way I could get out here was to teach. So I joined Teach for America, and I came out here to the Bay Area to teach second grade and fifth grade, and I was the most horrific teacher ever in the history. It was so not my thing. I tried so hard. And it was so hard for me. It is the hardest job I've ever had. And I've had a lot of jobs. I'm a mom. It's the hardest job out there. So my empathy for teachers in their role is sky high, because it was so hard, but I loved circle time. And I thought and that was just the best part of our day. And, doing morning meeting, doing afternoon check-ins, emergency circles so that we could solve problems. I was like, if I could do circle time all day, I would be winning at life.
Yeah.
And so I left teaching, worked at Starbucks for a long time, and then finally ended up with some after school programs, and I got to do circle time. I got to train our staff. I got to design educational plans for kids. I got to consult with teachers, and it was a fabulous fit for me. It was just the most exciting job, having my paws in all the different places at once and being able to be the kind of the hub to bring everything together was so exciting. And the impact was everywhere. It was at the child level, it was at the family level, it was at the institutional level with the schools, within this after school program. And that's when I found school psychology, because I wanted to do that as my career. I was in my early 20s, and I just felt like I had found it. And school psychology, you get to do all of those things. You are the hub. You have your paws in all the different places, and we become experts in all these different areas connected with the school. And there's so many places it can go. So I got jazzed, and I ended up back in school for school psychology.
We are so close, friends. The first cohort of LEP Launchpad Foundations begins on May 28th. If you are looking for live, expert-led coaching in the areas of business planning, finance, insurance, legal, and marketing, LEP Launchpad Foundations is the place to get it. Our sessions will be 90 minutes on Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we will receive LEP tailored guidance from professionals in the field, and we will have an opportunity to ask questions so that you feel prepared to start whatever venture you have planned. If you have any questions about the program, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at jana@empowerlep.com. I look forward to seeing you there. Yeah, and you went to UC Berkeley, or you went to UC
Yep.
Berkeley
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
their PhD program. I have a few friends who went through that as well. What made you choose that program just kind of over the other programs in the Bay Area?
It had an internship every year, and I wanted experience. Like you said before, I wanted the fastest path to be in schools.
Yeah.
And to have, I didn't want to spend a lot of time in theory. I wanted to be really practicing. And their program is super unique because you start your internships your first year. You're in schools from the get-go. And I just loved that. And so I actually wasn't really thinking PhD. I was more thinking experience. And this was a program, I think in my interview, I even told them, I'm not interested in a PhD. I just want the experience, which I'm sure completely endeared me to the admissions committee. I'm like, I don't really care about your program. I just want the internships. But I ended up loving the program. And and got my master's or got the credential to be able to work in schools, and completely forgot about my dissertation for the next 5 years. And that's not totally true, but I didn't finish for the next 5 years because I was so excited to just get into schools and start working. And so I kind of took a roundabout path to actually completing the full program.
Okay. And then you worked in Oakland Unified. Did you work in any other districts?
I was so dedicated to Oakland. So
Yeah.
I was working in Oakland before I started the program. And I became involved with their family resource centers.
Mhm.
And at the time that I was there, I mean, during the time I was there, it was 13 years that I was there. So during that decade, and almost a half, there was this huge movement in the small schools movement. And there was really exciting things happening to involve families and empower students. And so I got involved in that and creating the family resource centers. And so that was going on. I did all my internship work in Oakland, and then my dissertation was based on the family centers in Oakland. And so it was a very practical, I mean, we created something, and it still exists today. The family centers are still there. And so it was just incredible to be part of something. And so it took me a long time to write it up, but we were actually, because we were doing the project,
Yeah.
I was running the family center, so I didn't have time to write it up for a long time. And then finally we got that done, and I got the degree. But I went right from kind of volunteering in Oakland to interning in Oakland to working as a school psychologist. And I stayed with the same schools for years and years and years. So, and got to do all those different levels of work.
Yeah.
Which was really neat.
And then what happened?
And then, well, I think, um, at the end of the day, I did hit a burnout point, and I was running the crisis team for a long time, which was really, really important, and in work that was a good match for me. But I think um, I started learning a lot about vicarious trauma, and I think I was just reaching that point and needed to kind of take a step back. And I had gotten my LEP at some point just because I could. It was kind of hanging out. I think a lot of us do that. We kind of
Yep.
get the license, and then it hangs out there. But I think for self-care, I really needed to take a break and kind of do something a little bit different. And so I started to get interested in starting my own business, and it turned out it was the right time to make that transition, and I loved it so much that I have not looked back.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, I love this. Okay, so did you decide to start a practice and then just quit, or did you kind of start to build a practice while you were still working in schools? How'd that process work for you?
So this is the part I am so excited to talk about. So I started my practice with a series of experiments. I wanted to know um, the advice that I got at the very beginning was to create it based on what the need was out in the community instead of what thinking like what do I want to create. So I, spent some time thinking about what are the skill sets that I have and who do I want to serve? I want to serve families. Um, I want to serve a variety of families and I want to at the time, I wanted to do a balance of therapy and testing. So I wanted to really, really balance that. But the question I had was, what do people want? What can I actually create a business out of? So I have all these skills, but if there are no therapy clients out there and only testing clients, then I have to kind of figure that out first. So I did some interesting things. One is the first year that I had this idea, I still was working full time. And I contacted some of the psychologists in the community. I got involved in some of the local psychological associations. So like Alameda County has a psychological association. So I started signing up for these and going to meet and greets and getting to know people. And the advice that I got was not to sell myself or to try and have a pitch for why I'm so great, but to go out and try and help people. And this was the best advice because every interaction I had, I wasn't trying to sell myself, which feels icky to all of us. I mean, that's not how we're built as psychologists. But helping, that is how we're built. And so my job was in every interaction, networking interaction, was to understand what's the hardest part about this person's job right now. And is there something I could do to help? Is there a resource I could give them? Is there somebody I could connect them with? Is there something that I might think about or like go research later on and find something that could help them? And it felt so good. And I got a reputation as being helpful. So when people thought of me, they thought, oh, this is a really helpful person that has a lot of skills. Let's just send people her way. And I set up just using Calendly, which is just you can schedule calls with folks. I set up just a 30-minute free call, and I still do this to this day, that anybody can talk to me for free for 30 minutes. It's there, and it's how I started to understand what people needed, because I was connecting, doing my networking, my helpful networking, just trying to help people. And I would get phone calls, and then I would just try and figure out, and I didn't have an office yet, I would just try and figure out what are the people's needs? What are they looking for? And then I didn't have an office, so I would refer them to colleagues. So again, every phone call was just trying to help this family now. And now I'm closer to my clients.
Yep.
And then as soon as I had an actual referral, I rented an office.
Yeah, good. Okay.
So I was borrowing offices, like I would talk to people, and if it didn't work out, and I was getting enough calls at one point that I was like, okay, I'm going to just call a colleague and see if I can rent their office for an hour. So I saw my first client renting a colleague's office by the hour.
Yep.
And so no overhead. And then I got my first testing client, and that's when I started renting Saturdays. And this was halfway through, my last year, my last full-time year at the district. And then the next year, and then I filled up Saturdays. And then the next year I went to half-time and kind of took that leap. But it's this helpful marketing thing that was so pivotal, and just trying to get out there and show, and as opposed to tell, what I'm capable of doing as an educational psychologist.
Yep. Oh, I love that so much. That's a really, really great marketing strategy, and you're still doing it. Like I said at the beginning, like even when people come to your workshops, you give so much away. And it makes me think of when I was in grad school, and I think I've told this story a million times before, but I had a professor in a consultation class who would say, like, give psychology away in all of the conversations that you're having with the families at school and with like people in the community or other professionals. to help people understand what you do, even if you're not going to be the person that's ultimately going to be helping them then, but it will come back to you. You just give it away, you empower people with knowledge, and you will start to get that reputation, and people will trust you because you weren't trying to sell them something. You were just trying to help them. I love it. I love it. Very, very, very smart, Dr. Liz.
I think one of the things in business is that you're supposed to talk to your market and like figure out who these people are in your market. And we can't just go talk to a bunch of parents and say, we can't go get somebody's client list and say like, okay, I'm going to interview all your folks to see what you need.
Yeah.
And so it's just been such a great way to just keep tabs on what are the needs within the community and how can I adjust my services to make sure that I'm continually meeting those needs,
Yep.
without feeling like I'm trying to sell something, because
Right.
it's always from that helpful narrative.
Right. I mean, and when I've learned a lot about marketing in the past, couple of years. And one of the things I've also learned is like, I think I was just talking about this morning, your website shouldn't be about you. It should be about the people that you serve, right? It's not like, I did this and I have all these accolades. It's more like this is, you're trying to like help support a need, so that when parents come to you, they're not coming to you. They want to know that you can help them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, going to the business side, when you become an LEP now, or going to private practice with whatever credential you have, you're going into the business side of things, and you do have to be an entrepreneur. But the thing that is the big game changer for me is that people don't, the saying in entrepreneurship is people don't buy products, they buy solutions to problems. And my husband, who's an entrepreneur, he's taken that one step further, and he says that people really buy the feeling. And we are in such a wonderful position to, from the very first time we talk to families, to give them, or just on your website, right? To give families the experience of being held, to give them
Oh.
that experience of, I've got you.
Mm-hmm.
And I want the first interaction with a family to be like, this person's got me. Not, wow, this person has a lot of credentials,
Right. Right.
like they look very experienced, but like I, so many times on these phone calls, a parent will say, I feel like I'm breathing deeper now. I feel this is such a breath of fresh air. This is like, or you can just hear it, that like, oh,
Yeah.
and I want from the first interaction for that to be what it feels like.
Yep. I'm so with you. I explain to everybody who comes to work with me that one of the things I want everybody to feel like is that they've walked into a hug. That's what you just said.
That's it.
Like
Yep.
they feel like they're being held. Yeah. I want them to feel like they walked into a hug. And it's funny because my love language is not affection. But that's how I want people to feel. But yeah, I think that's also like a different, I mean, the whole business mindset is completely different from what we're used to doing in schools. But I think it's also what we're talking about right now is what we all want families and parents and kids to feel when they work with us. And sometimes in the schools, it feels not so much like that, right? And so you have to make this transition to not being afraid of being that for parents, right? Like, I think there's actually a shift that we have to do. And I would love to just kind of hear about your transition there. Was it difficult? Was it easy? Because we're like, in ed code land, and kind of like I've got these kind of like barriers, and some, a lot of times parents might be kind of thinking like, who is this school psychologist, and are they keeping something from me? Or we have just all these different experiences, I think, as school psychologists. And then you have to, like, one of the things I work on with my staff is helping to like ease their comfort level of talking with parents, I don't know. So can you talk a little bit about that and the transition?
Yeah, I mean, I came into this profession through the family centers.
Right.
So I think that I came in through this place of, our job is to hold families and empower families. And I actually, during my career and even in school, went up at in like at odds against a lot of the norms.
Mm.
And I was the one who was having side conversations with parents, like, I didn't tell you this, but here's how you can advocate for yourself.
Yep.
Or, doing before I talk to folks, and I teach this now in my trainings, that when we have really delicate information, we have to give parents a chance to hear it before the IEP meeting, because the IEP meeting itself is so intimidating.
Yep.
And there's nothing I mean, it just is. It is a parent against a bunch of professionals. And that puts us into the state. And so, I was kind of sneaking around and having meetings with families to say, listen, like, I want to talk to you about autism before the meeting, because I want you to have time to really process this. And so I think that going into private practice felt like a breath of, like, that I could breathe,
Yeah.
and actually have the conversations I wanted to have with families,
Yep.
and have it without feeling like I was stepping out of my role in some way, when it shouldn't be outside of our role to hold families in that way.
Yep.
But there are politics and district policies that can get sticky,
Yep. Yep.
especially if we don't feel like we have a voice.
Yep.
So I felt like now when I work with districts, when I work with families, either collaborating with schools, or I'll say collaborating within the context of an IEE, even in that context, um, it's being able to now have the conversations that felt so tricky and restricted before. Um, and it just feels like there's this release that now I can say what needs to be said.
Yep.
Um, So I don't think it was hard at all. I think it was the best part of making the transition.
Yep, I completely agree. It's like you don't have these boundaries. Like you can just be transparent, and it does feel like it feels amazing. It's one of my favorite parts of the private practice world. Okay, so let me take you back. So you start your private practice, you're on Saturdays, then it grows. Then at some point you fully leave the schools, you dive into private practice, and then tell us, like, are you, how did it go with the trainings, the brain building books, how did you kind of structure the whole thing? What were you thinking about? Because more than just, I work in a private practice, like you also do, so many other really cool things. And so how did that come about? And how do you incorporate all of that?
Yeah. So, through all of my phone calls with families, I started to realize that assessment was really the big need. And so I did therapy for a while, but I kind of dropped it off because the assessment work was much more consistent. And it was something that, yeah, the need was really out there for an assessor who could really dive deep and help families feel like they're really understood. And I got really excited about this taking longer, taking longer, going deeper, and being able to really ask those questions, and the sticky questions for some families, and kind of hang out in the uncertainty for a while. And one of the things that I was asked very early on that just we never got any training in was, can you talk to my kid about this? And I was just baffled by how hard it was. And if you've been to any of my trainings, you've heard this story a million times. But the very first kid that I ever tried to talk to, I did all the things you would expect. There was a metaphor, there was a visual, it was tangible. And he melted down and ran out of the room crying. And it has affected me for, this was 12 years ago at this point, and I am still choked up just thinking about it, right? um we weren't trained how to do this, and it's even come up as a question of whether it's part of our ethical obligation, and it just astounds me. Of course it's part of our ethical obligation to talk to our clients, our young clients, directly at their level.
Yeah.
So I went to the extent of going back to school and getting the diplomate in school neuropsychology because I wanted to be able to explain brains. And I wanted to help families like like at the beginning, I wanted to like put an X on the spot, right? Like this is what's going on, and to make it really tangible, and that maybe that would help us be like, I had all these ideas of being interactive, and I brought some kids through obstacle courses at the very beginning and like kind of like setting up their brain and bringing them through it and kind of where the sticky parts were, and experimented with just all these different ways of helping kids understand their brain, um, through the circuits and the structure, so that it could make it more concrete for them,
Mhm.
and for families. So I just kind of went on a really extensive deep dive into how do we make this information more accessible to folks. Oh yeah, the other thing I was seeing is that like now, not being part of an IEP meeting and just being one-on-one with families, I could see their eyes glaze over when I was reading through the report. We need to do it differently. We
Right.
definitely need to do it differently. So I wanted to be able for parents first to like draw things out and give them physical representations of what we were talking about. And got really into the kid piece too. So I I did the school neuropsych program, came back, started drawing out brains, and then that evolved into a PowerPoint for kids, which was too much to do. Just to develop a PowerPoint for every single child and a personalized story for every child was just too much. So that kind of evolved into something that was more templated, which became the brain building book,
Yep.
eventually, and it's just been, um, was really cool. So I think that that tool just came out of a personal necessity, and just seeing that now that I could kind of take more of a magnifying glass to the process, just seeing how big of a gap this was, that we were doing all this work and it just wasn't translating to our clients,
Right.
the big ones and the little ones.
Right.
So we needed to do something differently. So I did the book for myself. And then I have a wonderful colleague who said, I want one and you should put this out there. And I think she gave me a little kick, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna try it. The pandemic hit, and I thought, well, I can't test anybody, so I might as well, put some time into this and see if anybody else is interested. And a lot of people have been really interested, and it just
Yeah.
kind of went from there. And it feels so good to be able to put stuff out into the world that people are using.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, is just amazing. And this is a huge gap in our field. And so it's just been incredible. And it keeps me going because people keep using the stuff and finding it, or complaining that there's nothing and then being excited that there's something,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I remember I found the Testing Psychologist podcast during the pandemic, and I started listening, and that's I remember like I was like in pre-sale, like I was like I'm on the list to get the book. After hearing it was so cool. And I mean I really do, like just as a side note, like even if I don't go through the whole, even if I don't give a kid a whole book, I think just like showing them some of the pictures and talking about it. And I love the amygdala one, like, and with the self-regulation, like I talk about that, and the kids really resonate, and they'll come back and talk about it. If anybody wants to see, it's this page right here. I love, it's like the best
It's
page.
the best image in the book. It's so good.
Yeah, no, it really is. And you're definitely feeling that need. Okay. So you're doing your private practice, you're doing mostly assessment, you're doing these books, and then you're also doing trainings like virtually, in person, you're kind of everywhere. So how are you structuring your life? Like how, because one of the things about being out on your own is, you're kind of your own boss, and you have to juggle, now you don't have a regular school schedule. So how do you incorporate all these aspects of the things that you do now?
I started getting asked to do talks, which was just was so exciting. And the last year I definitely took on too many.
Mm.
And I think that it's because it was a new skill. And I think I always underestimate, I get very excited and then I underestimate what it takes to build a new skill. I mean, it's huge construction zone, right? To do the speaking circuit. So it was really, really fun and really overwhelming last year. So I think learning, kind of diving, like just being open to opportunity, and then um sitting back and, and evaluating the experience and kind of trying things a little bit different. And I think that the result of that is pursuing, my own approval to be able to provide CEs, because then now I can be on my schedule. And have a little more ownership over what I talk about and when. But it's been, I I want to emphasize that it's been amazing. Like it's so exciting, and I think that um the new opportunities kind of keep it fresh. And I think being on this side of the school wall, you get so many of these other opportunities. But there's definitely, I feel like I ebb and flow a lot. Like I kind of take on something new and then I have to have that experience to realize it's overwhelming, and then kind of step back and figure out, okay, how do I reintegrate this so that it can be sustainable?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't know how much that, I feel like the sustainability piece is something that's the work-life balance piece or whatnot, but the sustainability piece is a really important part of the business end of this, and trying to figure that out. And I think that's why, I ended up in assessment, because for me, just the way my brain works, being able to do deep dives into kids for a short period of time is, it turns out, how I work best.
Yep.
And so it's very mentally sustainable for me. It allows me to support my family. And so like it's really helpful to find that niche that's sustainable. And then it gives me the ability to kind of experiment with other projects. But I think I'm always on that search for what's that sustainable place where I'm super excited and invigorated by the newness, but not feeling overwhelmed by these new skills that I'm trying to
Right.
kind of build on the fly.
Right.
So
Yeah, because I imagine that you probably know that you have, like, I can do this many assessments in a month and this many talks in a month, but it doesn't start like that. Like you have to kind of feel it all out to schedule yourself, to get yourself to a place where you can balance all of the different things that you have going on, and also like
yeah,
sustainability. Right.
I think you're right. I mean, I have like looking here, I make these little like sheets quite a bit, and then I have just like, like kind of all the different projects that are, we're not looking at that project, but like kind of put out all the different projects. And
So you do it in a grid like that.
I gotta write with a pencil.
Yeah.
I gotta write with a pencil and figure out like what are all the, sorry, this was, yeah, it's funny. It's like, it's a little too much to put on the screen, but just,
Could
like,
not see it. There's
yeah,
no, I like cannot see
having a
what you
little
wrote.
grid and writing it out and figuring out. And I feel like I'm always doing this just to go back to basics and
Yeah.
think like, okay, what are my goals? Who do I
Mhm.
want to help? And like that initial question, who do I want to help? Well, I want to help. I want to help individual families, but now that's kind of shifted for me. Like I want to help communities. I want
Right.
to help families. I want to be able to do this at scale.
Right.
Okay, so that's a new goal. So now I have to figure out, how does that change my assessment load? And what does that mean if I'm going to make the talks feel like a way that I can do things at scale? I can reach a much larger audience if I'm doing these talks, partnering with agencies and getting the word out. But now I have to figure out, what does that look like if I operationalize it?
Mhm.
So from a business standpoint, it does come down to that, like, okay, now I know I can't do 3 talks a month. that's like too much for my brain,
Yeah.
but I can do one a month, right? And then I can work with my deep dive brain to be able to like, okay, this week I'm focused on this kid. Now this week I'm going to be developing this talk, and to kind of schedule things out, including like the other thing that's on here is like personal time,
Mm-hmm.
like family, like family time and my time, and how do I make sure that those things are in there so that I don't lose space
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
those things as well. So I get very technical about all the things because
Yeah.
there's so
Well,
many things I want to do and so many like it's all so exciting. I think
yeah.
kind of putting it down on paper is just old school, but helpful.
Yeah. But necessary. And so, like, how have you how have you learned to do all of this business stuff?
Oh, I married an entrepreneur who has been extremely helpful. And sorry, he just walked by. Um, so, his work is, is helping teachers, teach entrepreneurship. So and this came about because he saw a need for helping people learn how to be good entrepreneurs. And so he teaches this kind of way of figuring out who do you want to help? Like, what for you, like, what's your skill set? Who do you want to help? And then how do you find those people so that you can talk to them and figure out what they need? And then you develop your product, which for us is assessment or counseling or speak, like talks or whatever it is. But how do you develop that thing so that it's really going to help people?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that and like having some of that support, and I think just having a good partner to be able to talk about things and live the successes and failures with, I mean, all of that is really really important. So
Yeah.
I feel so fortunate all the time. And if you want the power behind the website and the technical support, that's definitely
Okay.
Justin.
Well, it sounds like
Fantastic,
I might
fantastic support.
I might need to get him onto the podcast to help our field.
We've done talks before together, like for psychologists, and kind of talking about starting up businesses, doing this helpful thing. Because I think that the biggest problem that psychologists always talk about is that it feels icky to sell myself.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll respond right away, then don't, because you're not going to start your business that way. You're going to start your business by figuring out what people's problems are. And he's always been fascinated that we are not the worst entrepreneurs. We should be the best entrepreneurs
Right.
because we know how to figure out what people need, what people need. We know how to listen.
Mm-hmm.
And what he's teaching university level students. And the main thing he's teaching them is how to listen, how to empathize, because that's how they're going to figure out what product is going to be most helpful to people.
Right.
And so that's just been, it's a really fun kind of symbiotic relationship that he learns, how to teach empathy from me. And then I learned how to use that to really create something that's going to be really helpful to people. And that feels great.
Yeah.
And it feels great to start a business like that. Whereas I think I've heard so many people say it just feels so gross to do all the business stuff. And for me, it's felt so great because of that mindset of how can I help?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges is, just like kind of learning how to make that shift from being, just kind of like an employee to being an entrepreneur and doing your own thing. And, so if you like, what kind of guidance might you give to school psychologists who are thinking about making a shift or doing something different? I'd like to know like what kind of guidance, and also like I don't know what kind of maybe training or like even just, shifting into the clinical world? Like, what do you think would be helpful for school psychologists as they're making a shift into the private sector in terms of just even their clinical experience too?
Well, I'm thinking we should do a workshop on this and we could
Okay.
like create something.
Yes,
So
I'm in.
I think the biggest thing is like when you think about marketing, think how can I help?
Mhm.
Not who am I, but how can I help? And the other huge thing is find the people that you want to help and find out how you can help them before you start thinking about brochures or websites even, or office space. Your website just proves you're a person. That's it. Like set something up quickly, and it just proves you exist. But your power as a psychologist is how you make people feel when you're talking to them. So think connecting to the way that we find our clients is connecting to local allied professionals. So if you want to do testing, connect with the therapy organizations and find out how you can help. My one of the best things I ever did was call the like local pediatricians and just say, listen, I'm starting a practice. Like I'd love to know what's the hardest part for you when when a kid is struggling in school? What's the hardest part for you when a kid is struggling in school? And they will tell you, school doesn't listen, or I don't know where to find resources, or um, parents are super confused, or whatever it is. And then you listen and then send them a resource. Listen, like I'd love to help. Can I come give an in-service? Or like, can I just send you a couple of things? Can I make you a handout that, use ChatGPT, make a handout and, send it to them and make it pretty. And then, they um just it's so helpful for, therapists to know they have a resource in the testing world, or pediatricians to know they have somebody to turn to. And by going out there and just seeing how can I be helpful, how can I give you a resource, it feels really good, and you start to make those connections and learn about the people that you want to help, and the referrals will come to you. And then you can find someone to rent some hours of an office space from and start seeing people.
Right,
So
right. Right. Well, it sounds like we do need to potentially like put our heads together because it's, exactly what I'm trying to do with Empower LEP as it grows is create a space for people to learn to make this, this shift and find, it's really like the work that we do, I think in private practice is really what we find is what feeds our souls. And it's why we're here, So I'm inspired helping other people find that within themselves and be able to, give that to the world. Okay, so with our last little bit of time, I would love, because we're going to have you back because we definitely need to talk about we need to go into detail about all these things that you have to all these topics that you talk so eloquently and amazingly about. But where can people find you? Where can they find your resources? What should they be looking out for? And we'll, of course, put that all in our notes.
yeah, so I'm at explainingbrains.com. And there's a tab for practitioners, a tab for parents, and you'll find everything there. I think that what's most exciting there is two things. One, if you're looking for resources for parents, on the parent tab, when you click any of the diagnoses that you see, so there's for dyslexia, for autism, for ADHD, for behavior challenges, for anxiety, you click on those and there's a whole just suite of resources that opens up. And these are things you can include in your reports, put it in your template. They're resources for parents, and it's a great way to open parents' minds to lots of different things that are out there. Just with one link in your
Yeah.
report so that they can get lots of different things there. And then, as I said, we just got approval from APA to offer continuing ed. So I'm really excited about that and hoping to do a lot of to offer a lot of CEs on how to do feedback with children, how to do neurodiversity affirming assessment, how to integrate AI into our work, and all kinds of stuff. Stuff for teachers. We got a whole list of things here that I'm hoping to be offering over the next year. So
Uh, Well, that's amazing. And I will say it has been so helpful for me. And I love how you make it so that you can, like all of the forms that you have are editable, so you can kind of make it your own. And I just appreciate so much that um, you've given us something that we can mold. We don't have to recreate the wheel, and we can just like use it. It's so helpful. Yeah, it's great.
that's the
Um,
ideas. This is so good to hear because that's like the idea, to put stuff out there that's just usable right away. So
Yes, and I'm getting into AI. It's a whole thing, but I'm learning, and you've also been very helpful with things that you've recommended in that realm. So, again, I just want to thank you, and thank you for coming onto the show. And I hope that you'll come back and talk to us more about the actual work that you're doing. But this was this was inspiring, and thank you for sharing your story with us.
oh, thank you. This has been really fun.
Awesome. Well, everybody, Dr. Liz Angoff, and thanks for listening to the show. Thank you for listening to the Empower LEP podcast. Episodes can be found at empowerlep.com. If you liked what you heard, please leave a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast player. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, or if you have any questions for me, don't hesitate to connect. I would love to learn more. I can be found at jana@empowerlep.com.